Dana Perino and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. Terror has struck again in New York City, just 6 weeks after that truck attack in Lower Manhattan. This time, a man with a pipe bomb strapped to him set off the device in a subway tunnel near Times Square in the height of the morning rush. 3 people were hurt, along with the suspect who is in custody. Here were authorities right after the incident.
This was an attempted terrorist attack. Thank God the perpetrator did not achieve his ultimate goals.
We've identified him as Kayed Ullah. He had burns and wounds to his body. Preliminary investigation at the scene indicates this male was wearing an improvised, low-tech explosive device attached to his body. He intentionally detonated that device.
Rick Levendal's at the scene in Midtown Manhattan with the very latest on what happened and what we're learning about this 27-year-old apprehended. Rick.
And Jesse, if the suspect's goal was to kill himself and others, as he apparently told authorities, well, then he failed miserably. And law enforcement sources are telling me that Kayed Ullah acted alone, that he had no co-conspirators, and that he collected at least some of the materials he used to build that pipe bomb from job sites where he worked as an electrician here in New York City. The 27-year-old, who was originally from Bangladesh, apparently traveled frequently overseas, according to sources, since he arrived here on an F-43 family immigration visa in 2011. He was a lawful permanent resident thanks to a program that President Trump is trying to scale back. Authorities say Ullah detonated that improvised explosive device at 7:20 this morning in an underground pedestrian tunnel that connects the Port Authority to Times Square. The device, a pipe bomb, was attached to his body with Velcro and zip ties, but he was the only one seriously hurt with burns and lacerations to his midsection and hands. 5 innocent people suffered minor injuries.
This is New York. The reality is that we are a target by many who would like to make a statement against democracy, against freedom. We have the Statue of Liberty in our harbor, and that makes us an international target. We understand that.
Ullah reportedly told investigators that he was inspired in part by ISIS videos online, and now the police and federal agents are searching his home, his parents' home, all of his devices, any access he had to the internet to see what he may have said online and who he might have been working with to ensure that he was in fact acting alone, Jesse, as this city remains on high alert tonight.
All right, Rick, thank you very much. And we're just getting a new comment from the President of the United States, Donald Trump, Kimberly, and he says this: today's terror suspect entered our country through extended family chain migration, which is incompatible with national security, and he calls for Congress to end chain migration and says that someone like this, convicted, should face the death penalty. What are your thoughts on today's events?
You know, I think it's powerful in terms of the comments from the president, but this is very consistent with what he has been talking about, you know, previously, saying that he was against chain migration. And when you see a situation like this, it's difficult to vet. This individual, in fact, was able to come in from an uncle, then through his mother, and be able to get in just prior, a couple months prior to his 21st birthday. And had he turned 21, then he wouldn't have been able to. So quite interesting, because you can see the loopholes in the law that the president and others are eager to close. And a situation like this where he's radicalized online, I mean, I really think that they should make even a larger push to shut down some of these radicalized sites that are really having such a powerful impact on people like this individual that come here to do harm, you know, to us. And it just takes one person with a pipe bomb, something like that. Okay, he wasn't very good at it. He injured himself. Not enough, obviously. He should have, you know, imposed a death penalty on himself right then and there. But thank God more people, you know, weren't injured or hurt. But it just goes to show you the complexity of the problem in combating terror in highly dense, or, you know, urban areas like this, in cities where you have a large population, a lot of people, and a potential for great numbers of, you know, of harm in terms of fatalities, et cetera, because we live in such like densely packed communities.
Yeah, and I think Port Authority is the largest bus terminal in the United States. We just heard from President Trump. We also heard from Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio. Dana, how do you think the local leadership handled the incident today?
Well, I think we're going to be finding out more about the 2 police officers. They were Port Authority police officers that were right on the scene immediately. Thankfully, there were only the 5 mild injuries that were reported, and a lot of it is ringing in the ears, which is consistent with this type of thing. But one of the things I think to point out, remember the truck attack a month ago. Then you have this. Anytime you have one of these incidents, look at how many resources we have to have in order to deal with any one of these events. It could be just this minor event, relatively minor for, thankfully, for there were no other casualties. But we are spending a lot to train our emergency medical personnel, our law enforcement, our intelligence. We have made a really big commitment. And then in the B block, Greg is going to talk a little bit more about the ideology and going forward, because there are things you can do to harden your defenses, and even some of these are soft targets. You can try to harden them, but what we really have to do is deal with the generational war that we are in, and we are on a war footing. And the other thing President Trump points out, not just about the chain migration, is I don't think I've ever heard him talk about the death penalty before. There was no other casualty here except for this guy, this individual getting himself injured. To call for the possibility of the death penalty in a case like that is certainly different. And I don't know if he's going to push forward on that, but it's something that might be more of a deterrent going forward.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that either. Greg, to Dana's point that we've seen spectacular coordinated attacks, right after 9/11 and obviously 9/11. And now we're seeing more crude and rudimentary attacks with just kind of, they like to say, lone wolves, but ISIS-inspired individuals. Those are very hard to prevent.
Well, you can't get a better. This is like the best you could hope for.
Yeah.
When a murderous D-bag has his own plan blow up in his ass. I mean, it's something like it's interesting how ISIS isn't taking credit for this one. They're just like, he's not ours. He's not ours.
They're all jihad fail. Disavow him.
But that's the funny part. But the unfunny part about it is, the mayor says, "Thank God that few were hurt," but it wasn't God. It was incompetence. Right. And the only reason why dozens didn't die was a failure in explosives. The intent is the same. It's just that the outcome, it's not divine intervention. It's that the guy wasn't very good at it. That should not make you feel good.
No.
Because that means we didn't stop it. He still could have done it. So we should be happy that no one died. That's great. But what happens is because the attack fails, it has so little effect because we immediately go on to do something else. We don't think about it. We almost think as though it's been foiled.
Right.
When factually it was lucky, right? It was failure.
False sense of security is what it produces.
Yeah.
All right, Juan, what do you think about today's events and how to move forward and prevent things like that from happening in New York City?
Well, I mean, unlike Greg, I think thank God, because I do think
I did say
incompetence.
I said it's good, but it's not God that stopped it. It was incompetence.
No. I'm just grateful that more people. Really, what we're talking about here are minor injuries, except for the guy who apparently damaged himself, his hand and his abdomen, right? But what I notice is in these situations, no contact with ISIS, although apparently he was ISIS-inspired.
Right.
And similarly, when I think back to the guy who ran his truck down the bike path here, I think late October, again, no direct contact, no coordination, but ISIS-inspired, right? So even as we can defeat ISIS, what we see is the ideology remaining something that is like a cancer. It's just out there, and especially on the internet. And this guy's 27. I disagree strongly with President Trump. I think family reunification is really great for America. I think families are so important, especially in immigrants, because I think they act as a check.
Precisely. That's why the whole thing is, if chain migration is okay one way, it should be okay both ways. Right. If they arrive in a chain and one person in that chain does something, leave in a chain, the potential for leaving in a chain might cause the family to pay more attention to the oddball in their family.
It's just like the way that unions used to give out cards. If you're somebody's cousin or brother or son, you're more likely to get a union card because they know that that other person, the senior person, is going to be watching you. You don't need a boss. You got somebody who's going to say to you, you better act right. You're representing the family.
So are you comparing unions to terrorists?
No, but what I'm saying
is going to be the headline on the internet.
I'm sure.
Analogy.
But I think that what you're seeing is here, I mean, this is one guy, 27 years old. Apparently, now the motive as we understand it is he said something to the effect of the United States is bombing my country and I think I should do some damage here. Well, how ridiculous is this?
No one is bombing Bangladesh.
That's what I'm just saying. That's what exactly
except,
what I
no,
thought.
except
Who
for
is
terrorists.
bombing Bangladesh? I'm glad you said that, Jesse, because to me it was like a puzzle. There's something going on I haven't heard about. But again, so he's some kind of nut.
Again, like technically he's incompetent, and then philosophically he's incompetent as well.
Right.
I want to address something you said quickly though, because you mentioned chain migration.
Yeah.
I don't think the president wants to make sure that families aren't unified when they come over here. I think the point is you don't want chain migration to make up 70% of all the foreign nationals that come legally into this country, which it is now. Kimberly, I think the president wants to have an immigration system based on merit, which when they look at education, language skills, how good they are with their hands, how smart they are, things like that. That needs to take a higher priority than if your uncle knows somebody.
Right, just make it more of a meritocracy, and also then it allows it to be more properly and thoroughly vetted in terms of what kind of contributions can you provide here to this country. We have a lot to offer you, so why shouldn't there be some reciprocity? And with that, thorough vetting. I'm all for it. When you see a situation like this today, it really does strengthen the argument that the president is trying to make, and you see that he's really had enough. Like Dana said, that he's gone out on a very far limb to say this could be a death penalty offense, despite the fact that there wasn't an actual loss of life. That's that's
just
very
unprecedented. That's one of the things that he does in a statement like this. He'll throw a little chum out there in the water where some of us will be like, oh, I could see that. That will definitely lead the news. And it will be much more about President Trump than calling for the death penalty for him rather than about the actual terrorists.
So I just wanted to make the point. The point I wanted to make to you earlier was, with regard to chain migration, this guy didn't come over here to do this. I think he came over here and then got this idea in his head. So this is like
that's not unusual, actually, if you look at several of the
Correct. I was about to make that point, that so many of the people who perpetrate these horrific, hard acts, in fact, are Americans who have gotten the idea over the internet.
Well, it's very hard to pinpoint exactly when someone was radicalized.
Well, that's the point, and we don't have evidence of that yet, so I'd rather wait for a forensic examination of all of his computers and his background and his life to see at what point he had contacts and at what point he became radicalized. Sure, some of it on the internet, but we don't know who he's been in contact with.
We're probably going to know more about this guy than the Las Vegas shooter in about 48 hours.
Well, and you know why? And this is the unsung inanimate hero here is surveillance. We know a lot because we saw it. Yep, we saw it. We need more cameras. If the only way to preserve freedom is more security, I know people hate this.
It's also the reason why people the Congress will take up before the end of the year the reauthorization of the 702 program, which is part of the FISA program, which talks about collection and what's allowed. And the president wants it reauthorized. There's going to be a fight about it, but I think he has the upper hand.
All right. Well, more to come on today's terror attack in New York City. Iraq has declared victory in its war against ISIS, but as we know, the fight against terror is far from over. Greg's monologue up next.
Yeah.
As ISIS is being routed, I have one question. Are you surprised? We knew when we eased the rules of engagement and let our men fight, the war would be swift and brutal. We knew once the decision was made to win, we would. It's an obvious truth ignored by the smarter, more enlightened class. Yet amidst this good news that we have beaten ISIS, a man sets off a bomb in the name of ISIS. Was he working with others? Who knows? Aren't we lucky it went the way it did? Hell yes. This is a lucky reminder that winning the war on ISIS isn't enough, because the war is bigger than that. As long as there is an ideology, a technology, and a loser seeking infamy that combines both, life itself is a target. It's a mistake to see the death of ISIS as the period at the end of a very ugly sentence, because once we kill this zombie, it returns in a different form. Even when we succeed in Iraq and they fail in a subway, ideology, the zombie fuel, persists. To ever ease up even a moment is idiotic. We keep being told, however, not to change our way of life.
Let's go back to work. We're not going to allow them to disrupt us. That's exactly what they want. And that is exactly what they're not going to get.
Okay, don't change your way of life. We get it. But change your way of thinking. Try this mind exercise. Imagine if today's attack were more sophisticated, that it combined something more capable to something more insidious. A drone, a deadly biological substance. Imagine that devastation. We often only imagine things until after they happen, but I don't. I'm hopelessly neurotic. I worry so you don't have to, but you should. So, Dana, Iraq declared victory over ISIS. Is it wise to declare victory? Every time that happens, something always happens. Yes.
Well, I think that they are also trying to show their domestic audience that they were, their population, that it has been worth it, that the new leadership there is saying, working with the United States, we were able to beat back ISIS. But, of course, the dangers lurk, and part of that also deals with Iran. So this is the generational war that started way back when. It's not even before, it was way before 9/11.
Yeah.
And excuses for some jihadists today that are saying, oh, it's because President Trump acknowledged Israel Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. That's just the latest in their long line of excuses. I would hope that the president does a couple of things when he releases his national security strategy in the next couple of weeks. I believe it's the next couple of weeks. I understand that it's finished. I think we have to talk about resources for state and local governments because of how much it takes in order to protect a city, especially like this one. This idea of see something, say something. I think that people in America need more information about this, like something specific, because today, when you're going through the underground passageway, and there's a guy in a coat, and everybody's in a coat.
Yeah.
What are you supposed to see, and who are you supposed to tell? The police officers at the Port Authority are obviously extremely good, but if I don't understand what seeing something and saying something means. I actually think that's about who his family might have known he was socializing with prior to this. And the last thing I would say is that I do think the administration is lacking at this point a counter ideology strategy. So the new national security strategy, when it comes out, I think it should include that.
Jesse, I report you whenever I can. When I see you, I say something.
For what?
Oh, anything I can think of.
A lot of options.
There's so many options.
You might find out tomorrow.
You know what's interesting about this war? Is that we didn't see much of it. And I have a theory that it's a new kind of war. It's autonomous, and we were so highly proficient in killing. Do you notice that we never saw anything? Isn't that weird? I think it's weird.
I think usually militaristic or expansionist ideologies are always wedded to a nation state. They have a conventional military. They have a large economy to go along with it. But now, and we would defeat them militarily. You know, Germany and Nazism, the totalitarian state in Japan, and then communism in Soviet Russia. Those were all defeated on conventional battlefields, and then their ideology was extinguished alongside of it. But radical Islamic ideology is completely different because there is no nation state, and when they tried to create the caliphate, they got decimated. There's really no economic engine behind it. It's all driven by religion. And so because the religion emphasizes martyrdom, you're going to have people go out willing to kill themselves and willing to kill innocent people, not just in the battlefield, but all over the world, in malls, in Times Square. So there's only a few ways to defeat it. Yeah, you have to defeat them with law enforcement or with the military, but you also have to say, listen, we need your help, whether it's see something, say something, and then use tools that were always considered a little edgy. Enhanced interrogation, enhanced surveillance, the travel ban, ending chain migration. Those are the types of tools that we need to use, I think, more aggressively, because we can't tolerate one innocent death. And that's what makes us different.
Well, you must be brokenhearted that ISIS has lost.
Why?
I don't know. I just thought I just thought I was trying to get you angry.
No, you don't. Hey, I enjoy time with you.
That sounded really convincing.
I'll tell you what struck me in this is, so you see that not only does the Iraqi prime minister declare victory, but Vladimir Putin has declared victory over ISIS and says that he's withdrawing his forces. And when you ask the question, why don't we see more of this? I think that in part because, one, the Russians were in there, and they weren't always acting in our interest. They were sometimes killing off people who were opposition to Assad, which the United States was supporting. I mean, Assad is still there. And the second thing to say about this is, you know, for all the upset to date, and, you know, we see this terrible thing happen that could have been far more dangerous, as you pointed out wisely. I think to myself, well, gosh, in the last few months, we've seen 58 people killed in Vegas. We've seen people killed at a Walmart in Denver. We've seen people at that Texas Baptist Church, 26 just raked down. And yet somehow we don't say, hey, there's something going on in this country. We got to immediately get tougher. No. Donald Trump says nothing.
Well, it's because
NRA says just keep going.
I think there's a difference because that guy should have been flagged on numerous occasions.
Which guy?
Well, think about the guy in Texas. They should have reported him for the domestic abuse. He should never have had a weapon.
Correct.
Those things fell through the cracks.
I want to get KG on this. I think there's a difference between one is propelled by ideology, an ideology that wants to snuff out the earth. The other are like absolute nutbags who got through the system. Kimberly, feel free to comment. The floor is yours.
Let me fix all this for you. Okay.
Thank you.
It's clear you need me again. So when you look at this and you're examining the ideology, and you really have to understand and go deep into jihad and Islamic terrorism and what they stand for versus an isolated incident from an individual. This is it's a movement. So whether you talk about the caliphate or whether you defeat ISIS, you still have all of those tentacles there and that ideology, and it will take a new shape or form and a new name. That's what it does. So when you look at a situation like this, there's a lot that we can do, and you have to be tough on it. And what we saw was President Trump in terms of restoring back the original rules of engagement and getting them away from what President Obama had in place. And there's many articles that are written about it this weekend about the big impact that had. That's one step. Then there is fighting this ideology online so people don't become radicalized. Then there is see something, say something, getting people involved, in communities. Then there's the immigration piece and making sure that people don't get in here that want to do us harm.
There you go. We've solved everything. I think we're just going to call it a day.
Bye.
Everybody over at my place.
You're welcome.
Margaritas.
Oh, wow.
It's election eve in Alabama. New polling and new developments on the Roy Moore, Doug Jones showdown next.
Know them. These allegations are completely false. I did not date underage women. I did not molest anyone.
Alabama GOP Senate nominee Roy Moore still denies the misconduct allegations against him. The special election is tomorrow, and according to our latest Fox News poll, Moore has a major hurdle to climb over the next 24 hours. He's trailing opponent Doug Jones by 10 points. He's about to hold his first public event in nearly a week. President Trump lending some more help over the weekend to Moore with a robocall to Alabama voters. Listen.
This is President Donald Trump, and I need Alabama to go vote for Roy Moore. We already know Democrat Doug Jones is a puppet of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, and he will vote with the Washington liberals every single time. Get out and vote for Roy Moore. His vote is our Republican Senate, and it's needed.
The state senior Republican senator feels differently from the president. Here's Richard Shelby.
I couldn't vote for Roy Moore. I didn't vote for Roy Moore, but I wrote in a distinguished Republican name. I understand where the president's coming from. I understand we would like to retain that seat in the U.S. Senate. But I tell you what, there's a time, we call it a tipping point. And I think so many accusations, so many cuts, so many drip, drip, drip. When it got to the 14-year-old story, that was enough for me.
All right, so Kimberly, you want to hear some good news?
Yeah, I do.
This election ends tomorrow at 8 p.m. when the polls close, and then we'll finally know what the result is going to be.
And the decision desk will bring it to us indeed. Look, this is a very strong move by the president to support the candidate. It's significant. Perhaps they would have liked to have it sooner before there was just more, bleeding out by the candidate. I don't know. I mean, let's see what happens with the polls. They've been wrong before. I think it's really going to depend on how much, they're able to get their people out and to get out the vote operation. But the Democrats have put a lot of money into some very strong ads for their candidate, for Jones, to try to get him over the hump. The problem is that Roy Moore does not enjoy the support across the board of the Republicans, like you just saw in the statement by Shelby. But a robocall, nevertheless, by the president could be persuasive to some in terms of thinking of the bigger picture, getting some elevation on it in terms of votes needed and, shoring up the strength that they have in Congress and the Senate.
Jesse, I don't know if it'll have an impact, but it has been almost a proxy battle in Alabama for national politicians making a case. So former President Obama and Vice President Biden also taped robocalls that they were trying to pour in there today. So it's possible that voters might have heard from both sides of the aisle. But they picked up their phone.
The stakes are high, and Charles Barkley is doing an event with Doug Jones tonight. They really need the black vote to come out for Jones. Right now, it's breaking down along class lines. You see mostly blue-collar, white Alabama people, not college-educated, going strongly for Moore, and then more white-collar, college-educated whites in the business community going in for Jones. It's just going to be about turnout. And with all due respect to the Fox poll, I think it's much closer than that. I believe a lot of people from Alabama, when they're asked who you're going to support, probably don't want to say, I'm going to vote for Roy Moore. I've said I have a big problem with Roy Moore. The combination of the explosive rhetoric out of him years ago and then to this day, when you add that to some of the credible allegations of inappropriate behavior, I think when he gets to the Senate, if he does, he's going to be a huge distraction. No one's even going to want to sit next to him at the Senate lunchroom. It's going to be very awkward, and he's just going to be hounded. So, listen, the timing of this, the Franken stuff really helped him. The Conyers stuff helped him. Distrust in media helped him. So he weathered the storm amazingly with a little help from Gloria Allred. That whole fiasco with the yearbook kind of swung things his way. But I heard he really caved this last weekend, didn't do a lot of events.
He hasn't done a public event in a week, but he's having a rally tonight.
Yeah.
Juan, what do you think is going to happen on the Democratic side?
Well, I think actually on the Democratic side, they're pretty much waiting. I mean, it's sort of their, in terms of the level, they're energized. But this is a red state. Let's not make any mistake about it. This is a conversation among Republicans about Judge Moore. And what you see is that the business community, Jesse mentioned this, just definitely feels that this would damage Alabama's standing with the business community as they try to bring jobs in, bring industry into Alabama. That kind of throws them back a step. But the other thing I would say about this that strikes me is that he was in Philadelphia. I think he was at the Army-Navy football game this weekend. So,
I don't know if that was ever confirmed.
but I think he was just gone. He's just like not there. And I think in part because he says things, like this weekend I was reading a quote where he said he wished everything after the 10th Amendment hadn't happened. That means that blacks aren't freed from slavery or get the right to vote, but also women don't get the right to vote. So much, this is Roy Moore, and yet it's not portrayed as this is his position, this is what he stands for. It's just like, says Donald Trump, he's a Republican and I need Republican votes. I think Richard Shelby and other Republicans are saying, hey, this is not the Republican Party.
So, Greg, I started this by saying there was good news that this election is going to be over tomorrow, but based on this discussion, I think it might not be over tomorrow.
No, it won't be. I hate team sport politics, and right now this is team sport politics. The argument is Moore is bad, but Team Democrat is worse.
That's what it comes down to.
I know, and it's a shame because it shouldn't be. It doesn't always have to be a team sport. Just because Trump is all in doesn't mean you have to be too. He'll understand. Because I know he didn't want to do this. He endorsed Strange, so he knew this guy was a problem. And his daughter, I'm on Team Ivanka on this thing, and I'm sure he still loves his daughter. So I think it's okay to say, even though Trump is endorsing this guy, it's because he has to, because it's his team. And I have to say, I hope the guy loses. And if you're upset that I say that, that's not on me. That's on a team sport ideology that's pernicious, because the long-term consequences of a Moore is much worse than the initial loss that you will experience tomorrow. Trust me.
And interesting, President Trump did not knock Senator Shelby for that statement.
Shelby is a conservative Republican.
Probably the most.
Yes.
All right. And also, Doug Jones might vote for tax reform. You never know. President Trump fired up at the media again over some incorrect reporting. Right back.
Everybody wanna be a superstar. That don't kill me, can only make me stronger.
As you know, President Trump was rightfully fired up on Friday about more bogus reporting by the mainstream media. CNN wrongfully reported the Trump campaign received advance information from WikiLeaks on hacked DNC documents before they were released. Then over the weekend, more fake news. Washington Post reporter Dave Weigel attempted to make it look like the stands were empty at the president's Pensacola rally on Friday in a tweet, but he posted pictures that were from hours before the event even started. Mr. Trump says the media is out of control. He calls all the lies a, quote, stain on America. His press secretary was also fired up about it today.
I would just say, Sarah, that journalists make honest mistakes, and that doesn't make them fake news. But the question that
when journalists make honest mistakes, they should own up to them. Sometimes, and a lot of times you don't. But there's a difference. There's a very big I'm sorry. I'm not finished. There's a very big difference between making honest mistakes and purposefully misleading the American people, something that happens regularly. You can't say, I'm not done. You cannot say, you cannot say that it's an honest mistake when you're purposely putting out information that you know to be false.
All right, Jesse, Sarah Sanders dropping the mic.
Oh, that was pretty strong performance by Sanders, and she has a point. Not just the things you mentioned at the top. Brian Ross tanked the stock market over some fake news, and then you had the Bloomberg story about, the investigation trying to subpoena bank records from Trump, which was also not true. So it's funny to me that every time that the mainstream media retracts a story, it's always against Trump. They're never making mistakes in favor of Trump.
Have you noticed
that,
Jesse?
They're never making mistakes when it comes to, the NFL or military operations or, a Fortune 500 company. All of the mistakes and the retractions and the fake news have something to do with making Trump look bad. So I don't believe it's honest mistakes. I believe it's even more than sloppy reporting because there's not a lot of other sloppy reporting. I don't remember a lot of retractions during the Obama administration. There have been more retractions in 1 year of Trump than there were 8 years on President Obama. So I believe it's ideologically motivated.
He does make a fascinating point. There's no mistakes made in favor of the president that would be auspicious for him. It's all stuff that they have to walk back.
Well, wait a second. Just last week, didn't ABC pull a producer who was giving the Trump campaign some poll numbers at the end of the campaign? I think that's true.
Everybody gets those.
Oh, okay. And I think that we know about Project Veritas trying to make up stuff. I think we know about that, trying to embarrass media, right? So I think these things happen.
No, I'm talking about mistakes that benefit, like a story where they put something forward that benefits the president or his favor.
Right. I'm saying there are things here that would have helped the president, right, in terms of that story from the ABC providing support and poll numbers to the
That's not
president's
a story,
campaign.
Juan. That's just something reporters do with
I'm saying Project Veritas was trying to generate stories.
I wouldn't compare Project Veritas to ABC News.
Okay, but what I'm saying is you've got a situation where the biggest story in America today, I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat, is the Mueller investigation into Donald Trump. Everybody's after that story. Maybe more people are after Trump's tax returns. I don't know, but they haven't gotten that.
Maybe they're a little too anxious because they keep making mistakes.
But I'm saying that's where the competition. It's like you and I are in a fight, Jesse. You know what? Everybody in America says that is the story. Who's going to get the story inside the Mueller investigation?
Okay, well, they're sloppy because they're chomping at the bit.
Maybe. But I don't think that it's necessarily evidence that, as you guys are arguing, it's anti-Trump. I think it's that media in a competition, and sometimes people get sloppy. Brian Ross at ABC got real sloppy.
Got to get some new sources.
Okay, Dana, so what do you make of this, the developments over the weekend, and also how the communications were, handled about it? Because Sarah Sanders taking a very strong stand following up on the positioning and the statements of the president.
Well, I think that just like on the sexual harassment stories, there are degrees of misconduct, right? So there are things that are actually blatantly false and totally abhorrent, and that's what Brian Ross did at ABC News. It's not the first time, okay? So there's a pattern there. But then you take somebody like Dave Weigel, who, of the Washington Post, tweeted the picture of the crowd size. He tweets it from his personal account, though he is affiliated, of course, with the Washington Post, works for them. And he immediately apologizes within 20 minutes, but then they have to pound him all weekend long. And I think that is just over the line. My advice would be, if your performance numbers for your job do not directly tie to your Twitter account, set the thing down. Use it for a news source, but unless you are absolutely sure that something is a go, don't tweet about it. It doesn't help your bottom line for your company, and it might actually hurt your career.
Yeah, exactly. Throttle back on the tweets, Greg.
Yes, I've been trying.
Please, especially after the Christmas party tonight.
I do believe, first you got to be careful about mocking other networks because it always happens the next day after you say something about CNN.
Great.
I end up going, I made a mistake. And then you try to do it very quickly. But anyway, it is kind of an honest mistake in the sense that the golden rule is, if you really want something to be true, you should do your damnedest to prove yourself wrong because you know that your confirmation bias is driving you to make a decision because the story is so good and fits into your assumptions. It's too perfect. You want it to be right. So you actually have to be really careful that you're trying to delude yourself. All of these mistakes are based on wanting the story to be true, and it turns out it's not. So it's like you have to question your own delusions. And the irony is, Donald Trump is actually, in an odd way, making journalism great again, because now they have to be extra careful or they prove him right. So they have to, now they go like, if I screw up this time, I'm never going to hear the end of it. Everybody's going to be pissed off.
All right. Thank you so much for that.
I liked your facial expressions while I was talking.
Did you find them motivational?
You had a look of horror. What was I doing?
Well, I'm authentic. All right. A safe space at Fordham University gets a visit from some pro-Trump supporters. Find out what happens next ahead.
A political scuffle at Fordham University, at the coffee shop after all, and all because of some Make America Great Again hats. Check out this video of a student employee kicking out a pro-Trump group because they were allegedly in violation of the shop's safe space policy.
So ridiculous.
I don't want people like you supporting this club.
Well, then you should include that I want a refund on my coffee.
Like you are wearing hats that completely violate your safe space policy. I'm
Does this
you
hat have a
take it
racist
off or
slur
you
on it?
have to go.
Does
Yes, it does.
What is that?
3 minutes. 3
What does the acronym
minutes.
stand for?
Fascism, Nazis. Okay, what do you want? 3 minutes.
I do not see fascism, Nazis on this hat. I see America.
Minutes.
My
Wow.
goodness.
So strong feelings, Kimberly.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so over the top and hysterical. I mean, obviously people are getting completely overwrought over nothing. And I don't understand. Make America Great. Like, what's wrong with the hat? Really? Really? You have like ISIS and terrorists trying to blow us up, and you're upset over a hat. You're losing it over a hat.
So if they were wearing an ISIS hat, you would say similarly, leave it alone, don't say a word?
You can wear whatever you want. I really don't care. It's there for coffee. I can't believe people in college care about this stuff. I know you've banned this, but this is Snowflake City Gutfeld, or I should say Greg. I know you don't like it when I say your last name.
Oh, you don't?
It's pathetic. Yes, Guilfoyle. It is pathetic. And it's sad. It's just sad. And these creatures are never going to make it in the real world.
So, Dana, a similar incident happened at Howard University, but apparently there was more of a intent to stimulate that kind of crime.
Well, I think there is a little bit of this of being provocative to see if you can get a reaction and get it on camera, so they'll play it on the 5, because we know we get pitched that stuff all the time. But I think that even the left understands that they're starting to have a problem. No, not starting. That they have a major problem on campuses, but it's been going on for many years, and they've got to figure out a way to get around it.
Mr. Gregg.
The left mastered the wearable message. Every van covered in bumper stickers, that was not a conservative. It was always a liberal, at least when I was growing up. So now political messages have migrated to the right. People are doing it, and it is a political message. You're going in there, you're wearing that. But a hat shouldn't upset you. I mean, in the old days, the young were adventurous. They went out and did stuff. Now they retreat into these safe spaces, and they can't. If you're scared of a hat, what happens if you see a pair of pants?
Oh, my goodness. One more thing up next.